Well, this is Dr. Stan here at Radio Liberty, coming to you from the hills overlooking beautiful and picturesque Monterey Bay and bringing you the news behind the news, the story behind the story. Hoping to convince you that reality is usually scoffed at, that illusion is usually king. But in the battle for survival of Western civilization, it's going to be reality and not illusion or delusion that's going to determine what the future will bring. And I need to remind you the views expressed here are not necessarily those of the owners, management, staff, sponsors, or supporters of the station you're listening to. They happen to be my views, and well, for the next hour, they're going to be the views of our good friend, Lindsey Williams. Hi, Lindsey. How are we doing?
Dr. Stan, it is so good to be with you tonight. I thank you for allowing me to be on your program.
Well, why don't you just pick up the story and tell us what your views are? And so you're going to be calling into that station over there in Birmingham tomorrow, aren't you?
Oh, yes. I'm looking forward to that also, and thank you for recommending me.
All right, fine. Well, you go ahead and pick up the story.
I am so interested in what's happening with these presidential debates. Now, I'm not taking sides in any manner, but, you know, when these things happen, it is so comical to watch. Knowing a little bit of the background, it was so interesting that prior to the debate on Wednesday, October the 3rd, that was the previous presidential debate, that morning, you know the person, I won't call them by name, you talked with them on the phone that time, they sent me an email and said, Chaplain, watch for certain things on that night. And then, of course, that was the night that Mr. Obama just gloriously messed up, fell all over himself, couldn't put his words together. And it was so interesting that I had already been warned in an email that morning of the obvious of what might take place that night. Now, the same thing, of course, took place again tonight with the presidential debates. And some of the same subjects were brought up, and it was quite obvious that Mr. Obama was very upset, kind of lost his place a time or two again when these subjects were brought up. And you remember, Dr. Stan, that I said on your program back, it must have been, 6-7 months ago, you had me on, and I said that I had just talked with my elite friend, and he had said to me that they were very upset with Mr. Obama because he had canceled out on the Cross Canada oil pipeline. They wanted that so that they could bring that oil in. And he intentionally double-crossed the elite and canceled out on that pipeline. And my elite friend, I think at the time I said it's in your archives, he was so angry on the telephone, and he made a very unusual statement, which I was surprised afterwards that he had made. And he said, he's a Muslim. Those were his exact words. And at the time, I questioned him, asked him what he was talking about, and he said, well, he had canceled out on the Cross-Canada pipeline the president had in favor of his Muslim Brotherhood friends because he knew the campaign, the money that they were going to give to his campaign. Well, now, of course, we come to these presidential debates, and the first one, I had been kind of forewarned that there were certain buzzwords that would be said in the course of it all, and I remembered back very carefully that they had told me that when Obama canceled out on the Cross-Canada pipeline, that it had caused a lot of problems and dissension between the elite and Mr. Obama. Then we came to that first debate, and Mr. Obama was like a child that had been caught with his hand in the cookie jar. It was actually so comical to watch him. Here's a man that has charisma galore. He can mesmerize his audience. In fact, he quite frankly can hypnotize his audience. And all of a sudden, he was stumbling all over himself, couldn't get his words together.
Well, Lindsey, do you think that this is all staged? Do you think this is preordained? Do you think that we are simply watching some sort of an act being put on? What's your impression? Is this intentional on his part?
Well, I think that, I know this. I mean, this is a fact. I've known this for the past 7 months. They did not want Mr. Obama back in again.
All right, fine. We'll be back in just a moment. All right, Lindsey, and I think you're absolutely right. I certainly have my other sources of information. I have Mortimer Zuckerman, who is the editor of U.S. News and World Report. He's certainly a trilateralist CFR. He's one of the elite who runs our country, and it's very obvious reading his articles, which you can get off the internet, that the trilateralists are backing Mitt Romney. This is very, very clear, very straightforward. So basically, although we watch the media every day and we see what the polls are, the people who really make the decisions, the people really don't vote for the president. They go to the polls and cast their vote, but the decisions are made independently, and whether they've rigged the elections, whether they miscount the votes, I don't know, but I do know that it has very little to do with what the people want. The elite pick our president. We go to the polls every 4 years to try to throw the rascals out, but nothing really changes. Go right ahead, Lindsey.
Well, I was told numbers of months ago that if the older elite, and be sure and be careful and notice the words here, the older elite, the ones that are retired, they're in their 70s and 80s now, the ones that I know, and the younger elite are a little more liberal, but yet on the other hand, I was told back numbers of months ago that if the older elite had their way, that Mr. Obama would not get back in. And of course, at the time, everyone was forecasting that Obama was going to win. He'll pull something off, October surprise, or something will happen. And I kept on saying, don't think so. I can't quite go that route. I have been told, and of course, Dr. Stan, as you know, I just have to tell it as my elite friend tells me, even sometimes though it might not agree with what some people may be thinking at the time, but yet now it's quite obvious that he couldn't start a war over in the Middle East right now. I mean, a war with Iran would definitely hurt Mr. Obama something horrible. So you don't have to worry about Israel. You don't have to worry about Iran. You don't have to worry about major uprisings there, at least through the next 3 weeks. And then you come down to bank closings and the currency exchange and all of that and devaluation. And I told him, I said, no, it's not time yet. I would call up my elite friend about every 3 months and I'd say, are we going to have bank closings and devaluation? Is there going to be a currency collapse? And you say, no, Chaplain, not in the next 3 months. We're still in the process of creating major credit problems around the world. And he said, we've got to get more debt in every nation. And I said, okay, I'd come back on your show and other shows, and I'd say, no, the next 3 months is not going to be a collapse of the dollar. Well, I'll say the same thing again.
Hold that thought. Well, I guess it's Lindsey Williams, and Lindsey is saying that he has heard from his friend in the elite that, of course, that they want Romney to be elected, and if they have their way, Romney will become the next president of the United States. And this is what I'm getting from my contacts, and, well, of course, not really contacts. I don't have good contacts like Lindsey does, but I know who the elite are, and certainly one of them is a man named Mortimer Zuckerman, a very brilliant man. I really enjoy reading his editorials in U.S. News and World Report, and if you read his last few editorials, it's very obvious that Mortimer Zuckerman, Trilateral Commission, Council on Foreign Relations, Mortimer Zuckerman, representing the elite who run America, wants to get Romney in. So go right ahead, Lindsey.
Well, this is exactly what I heard also, but I heard it numbers of months ago from my elite friend when he said that the first issue, of course, was Cross-Canada Pipeline. Now, there are three things that if you're taking notes tonight, and I hope you are, you definitely are going to need pencil and paper here in a moment or two when I come down to some other things that I want to bring out in relation to the dollar. You know, I've made the statement now based on what my elite friend has told me for, let's see, at least a year and a half, that by the end of 2012, the dollar would be dead. I still stand by my statement, and I hope you have pencils and paper so you can write some notes down about that in just a few moments. But for right now, the three items that caused Mr. Obama to completely lose it, he actually was scared stiff. He was disoriented. He was speechless in that previous one, October the 3rd. And tonight, some of these same things were brought up. Now, write them down, if you will. Number one was Cross-Canada Pipeline, which I have already mentioned. Number two was the Dodd-Frank bill. You may have noticed it, and if you didn't, and you didn't catch it, go back to that Wednesday, October the 3rd, presidential debate, and look when the Dodd-Frank bill was mentioned. And he just completely became speechless. I mean, he really couldn't put his thoughts together. And the reason why is because Mr. Obama had pushed that through. He did it in favor of some of his friends, and it was a double cross of the elite. And in that Dodd-Frank bill is a Consumer Finance Protection Bureau, and you've noticed that Mr. Romney stated outright that he will rewrite that bill. Well, when he said that, it completely disoriented Mr. Obama. And then the third item is production of American oil. And I watched for that tonight in the debate, and it was brought up time after time again. And every time it was brought up, you could almost see the wrinkles come out of Mr. Obama's face, because he knew very well. It's almost as if the elite had slapped Mr. Obama in the face, and it was so obvious. Anyway, just thought I'd bring those up tonight, Dr. Stan, because there were some things there that were, in one way, comical. In another way, I don't know whether I should feel sorry for him or not, really, but it was so interesting to have received that email back that morning before the debate that night. Okay, now the next item, please. This is so vitally important, and I hope you've had time to get those pencils and paper, because I want to give you the 12 items that were just given to me. Yeah, you heard me correctly. The items that were just given to me in relation to the American dollar, our greenback, our Federal Reserve note, our currency, and the statement that was made to me probably a year and a half ago, and I put it in my presentation this year, which I did about a year ago, entitled 2012, the beginning of the end. It was recorded, so nobody can say I didn't say it, that by the end of 2012, the dollar would be dead, and I want to list those items right now and show you where the status of this is in the mind of my elite friend. Now, take these dates down. Number one, February of 2012. Now, before I go any further, let me state that all of these things have taken place in the year of 2012. I'll give you dates for many of them. Everything has happened since January the 1st of 2012. First of all, February of 2012, the largest trade agreement that was ever signed in the history of the world was signed between China and Japan. Now, China being the second largest economy in the world, Japan being the third largest economy in the world, and China and Japan on that date signed a trade agreement that they would trade amongst each other products. Now, go to Walmart or Target, and nearly everything you'll find there will be either marked made in China or made in Japan. But yet these two great trade countries have said, we will buy and sell and trade amongst each other, and we will not use the American dollar. Can you imagine the billions of American dollars that will not be needed any longer in the reserve currency of the world? Are you catching this? As long as you and I, everyone out there listening to this program, and Dr. Stan, you and I, as long as you and I have known it, and Dr. Stan, you and I are not too far from each other in age, but as long as we have known, the American dollar has been the reserve currency of the world. Anyone, any big countries like China, Japan, India, all of these countries, they use the dollar for the sale and trade of products, because that's all there was out there. That's what they had to do. If they were going to sell amongst each other, they would automatically do it, and they would use SWIFT, which is the Society of Worldwide Interbank Financial Telecommunications, in order to transfer the money. And it has always been the American dollar that was used as the reserve currency. And, number two, it has always been the American dollar that is used as the petrodollar. Never. Since crude oil became the great motivating force of our modern-day industrialized world, the American dollar has always been called the petrodollar, and no country ever did business in selling and trading of oil unless they used the petrodollar. It's not that way anymore since January the 1st. Now, this is explaining why the dollar will be dead. I did not say non-existent. Many of you have heard me as I've used this phrase. The dollar will be dead by the end of 2012, not non-existent. I know you can still go to the grocery store. You can still use it today. So you say, Chaplain, why are you saying it's going to be dead? Well, here we are. February 2012, China and Japan signed the agreement. No more use of the American dollar when we sell and trade amongst each other. Number two, on September the 7th of 2012, China and Russia. Now, you'll find this if you want to go on the Internet. Look under China Daily, and you'll find an article about this on September the 7th, 2012. And China and Russia said, we are going to sell and trade products amongst ourselves, and we will not use the American dollar for the sale and trade of those products. Well, here's a few more billion American dollars that is no longer needed. This out there in the marketplace. Number three, China and Brazil. Please go to an article in BBC, British Broadcasting, and look up China and Brazil, and they just signed an agreement that they likewise will trade amongst each other, and they will not use the American dollar for the sale and trade of their products. Now, you remember, okay, let me go on down further, and then I'll get back to the BRICS part. Now, let's go to the next one. The next one is China and Australia. And you'll find this in the Financial Express. There's an article. I'm telling you where to find these if you want them. China and Australia just signed recently an agreement that they will trade amongst themselves and will not use the American dollar. Here is a few more billion American dollars not needed any longer in world trade as a reserve currency of the world. Then the next one, India and Japan. I hope you saw this one. It is the largest currency swap deal of 2012 was India and Japan. Reuters carried a news article on this, and they said that they had just signed an agreement that they would sell and trade each other their goods, and they will not use the American dollar in the sale and the trade. The next one, please write these down, and you're going to see these become a major issue. The next one is India and China are buying oil from Iran. You remember that the United States of America put sanctions on Iran about the same time that the UN did, and at the time they said, you can't use the American dollar any longer. If you're buying oil from Iran, let's see, I think it's about 2.5 million barrels of oil per day Iran produces, and they said, okay, you can sell your oil if you can, but you cannot use the American dollar. Well, India and China both needed that oil desperately. They said, no problem. We'll just ship you outright gold for the payment of your oil. We'll bypass the American dollar altogether. The next one, Iran and Russia. Now, you'll find an article in Bloomberg on this. Iran and Russia. Russia said, we want to do business amongst ourselves, and we can coordinate the selling of our oil because Russia is the number one supplier of crude oil on the face of the earth today, bypassing Saudi Arabia as of last year. And Iran and Russia said, okay, we will likewise and not use the American dollar in any of these sales and trades since America has put sanctions on you. The next one, China and Chile signed a new agreement just recently, and that will not use the American dollar in products that we sell and trade amongst each other. Then there is the next one. Please write this one down. China and the United Arab Emirates. You'll find CNN announced this just recently, and they said, we are no longer going to use the American dollar when we're selling and trading products amongst ourselves. Dr. Stan, I thought I heard the music there.
You do, but you've got time for one more if you have it.
Okay, the next one, China and Africa. And please write this one down. Africa's largest bank, the Standard Bank, said that it will now handle any transactions necessary between China and Africa. And right now, China is the number one supplier of products to Africa.
Hold that thought. Hold the thought. Go right ahead, Lindsey.
So all of these countries, I'm going to list just a few more for you. You remember on April the 5th of 2012, what is commonly called BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, met and they said, we're going to sell and trade amongst ourselves, and we will not use the American dollar for the sale and trade of products. And when I saw the statistics on the BRICS agreement, I was utterly amazed. These 5 countries represent 43% of the world's population, 18% of the world's GDP, and 53% of the global financial capital. And on March the 29th, they said, we are going to sell and trade products amongst ourselves, and we will not use the American dollar. Can you imagine the billions of American dollars that will not be needed any longer in that BRICS agreement? Okay. China and Germany. Write the date down. September the 7th. This is just recently. September the 7th, 2012, China and Germany signed an agreement. Now, Germany is the most prospering economy in the European Union group, and China and Germany said, we are not going to use the American dollar any longer for sale and trade amongst our own products. Then the very latest one just happened days ago, September the 6th, 2012. I'll read it to you. China officially announced that any currency in the world, any country that wishes to sell crude oil using its currency, the Chinese currency, instead of the U.S. dollar, can do so. People, did you catch this? This is the petrodollar. No, not only is the American dollar no longer the reserve currency of the world, it is no longer the petrodollar of the world. So China has now stepped up and said, we won't use it. Any country in the world that wants to buy and sell. Can you imagine Venezuela, the Arab countries, on and on you go, now China has offered them to use their currency that they've set up, all the exchanges necessary. Don't even have to go through SWIFT any longer. Now they will do it directly out of China, and the next day, are you catching this? That was September the 6th that China officially announced that. On September the 7th of 2012, Russia announced that the nation will sell China all the crude oil that it needs, no limitations whatsoever, and they will not use the American dollar as the sale and the trade of that crude oil, folks. I hope you see what's happening. You know, the only people today in the world that I know of that don't know that the American dollar is dead is the American people themselves. As a person said to me the other day, they said, well, Chaplain, we can still take our dollars to the grocery store and to the hardware store and the drugstore and buy what we need. I said, you can right now. Do you know how long it's going to take the chickens to come home to roost? Please catch this. I'm glad I was brought up on a farm as a boy. It is going to take somewhere in the neighborhood of 6 to 8 months. Now, mark my words, put this down on the calendar, watch it, you're going to see it happen. It is going to be devastating when it comes home. It'll take 6 to 8 months for all of these trillions, I mean literally trillions of American dollars, unwanted and unused.
Hold that thought, Lindsey. We'll be right back here. Well, this is Dr. Stan, and Lindsey is simply pointing out that so many of the countries in the world, whether it be China and Russia, have said that they will trade oil, but of course they're not going to use the dollar, and certainly the BRIC nations, certainly Lindsey has listed probably 12, 14 different agreements with the major nations of the world that are going to stop using the dollar as a matter of trade. And when that happens, of course, it means that the dollar is no longer effective. He says it's going to be 6 to 8 months before it becomes apparent that the dollar is no longer being the primary currency used in world trade. And when that happens, the trillions of dollars that are out all over the world being held as reserve currency by countries are going to be disengorged. It's going to be sent back to America. And when that happens, there's going to be significant, if not catastrophic, inflation. Go right ahead, Lindsey.
All of this has happened since January the 1st. Yes, every bit of it. This has never happened before in the history of the American dollar, that nations like this have said, we do not need your currency any longer. The policies of our government, the national debt of $16 trillion, the nations of the world are becoming literally scared to death of the American dollar. They don't trust us any longer. They don't trust our currency to be used any longer. They know that this currency has to, at some point, collapse. They do not want to be holding that currency when it collapses. They're trying to devise a method whereby amongst themselves they can sell and trade without using the American dollar. All of this since January the 1st, and what I'm trying to bring out so much is, you say, well, Chaplain, it hasn't happened yet. No. But don't you want to prepare in advance before you see the inevitable take place? There is no possibility that these many nations and trillions of dollars, as Dr. Stan has just indicated, when these come back unused, unwanted, it is going to have a devastating effect upon the American dollar. Now, let me go to one other item. That one of the reasons that the world is so afraid of the American dollar is because of what happened on September the 13th of 2012. I guess the best way to put this is that the most dastardly act that has ever been perpetrated on the American people in the history of our country as far as currency is concerned took place on September the 13th of 2012. The nations of the world see the handwriting on the wall, and they are trying to exit from the use of the American dollar as fast as they possibly can so that they won't get caught when the American dollar collapses. And it will. You say, well, it hasn't happened yet. Give it 6 to 8 months. Just watch. This currency is returning home. Now, the nations of the world see it happening. They realize our national debt. What happened on September the 13th of 2012? You heard it on the national news. It was no secret. Mr. Bernanke, chairman of the Federal Reserve, announced it, and he said the Federal Reserve announced that it will purchase $40 billion in mortgage-backed securities and treasuries each month indefinitely. Now, $40 billion in September, $40 billion in October, November, December, January, indefinitely. He said this will continue, and when I heard that, I was appalled. I can readily understand why the nations of the world are getting out of the American dollar as fast as they possibly can.
Well, you know, Lindsey, it's really much more than simply the $40 billion of mortgage bonds. He's going to buy another $45 billion a year, bringing that up to $85 billion, I should say, a month. The other $45 billion is going to be Treasury bills. Why? Because, of course, the Treasury has to borrow money every single month to pay its bills. It had to borrow approximately $1 trillion, $1.1 trillion. That's almost $100 billion a month. And basically, they're having to borrow that money. Where are they getting it? Well, they'd like other countries to borrow it to actually buy the bonds. They're not doing it. So the Federal Reserve is actually buying, they will admit, $45 billion a month in addition to what they're doing as far as the mortgage bonds. Now another $45 billion in Treasury bills, and they're probably actually buying much more than that to other sources. And it's just money they're creating out of nothing. They don't have any money. Simply the Federal Reserve simply creates money, and this is a pathway to destruction. almost $100 billion a month, $80 billion a month. The Fed is certainly putting out there, creating out of nothing, the one-way path to inflation. We're going to be back in just a moment with Lindsey Williams right here at Radio Liberty. Lindsey, you go right ahead.
When a person sees storm clouds on the horizon, they normally take precautions. If a person knew that a hurricane was coming and they lived in the path of that hurricane, they would definitely do something about it. If you know that these things are happening, which I've just listed for you, and my elite friend have told me what is taking place, when you know that 6 to 8 months down the line, you're going to face these things, do you realize that right now, if you take precautions, you can save yourself a lot of heartache? That's the reason Dr. Stan is here on Radio Liberty. That's the reason that I have the privilege of appearing on Dr. Stan's show. We are trying every way possible to help you spare your dinner table, save yourself heartache, and to give you the warning signs in advance. That's right. You are hearing this 8 months in advance. We're trying our best to tell you now what you're going to see take place and why it's taking place. You don't have to guess at this. It's not like some financial newsletter that says, oh, it's going to take place a month from now. No. I am giving you facts and figures that have been given to me. Now, you folks do remember, there may be a few new listeners out there tonight, Dr. Stan. Remember that I was invited years ago. I've been the pastor of a church for many years, and I was actually invited to be the chaplain to the elite of the world for a 3-year period. Got to know some of these people quite personally, have kept in touch with them now for about 35 years. Most of them are retired in their 70s and 80s, and they have given me this information. And I've had the privilege, by the providence of God, of passing it on to people and saving them much heartache. What I'm trying to do tonight is to help you realize that storm is out there. It's on the horizon. It has not arrived yet, but the storm is on the horizon. The hurricane winds have begun to pick up. The nations of the world that you've just heard me list, these different agreements that have been made, these nations, likewise, have seen the storm clouds now for the past year and a half, and they are rushing to get out of the American dollar, to cash in their T-bills, to get free from the American dollar every way possible. They don't want the dollar to collapse and them not have a currency to trade in. So as a result, they're making these agreements so that they can trade amongst themselves. Then the Federal Reserve came along out of utter desperation. I don't know any other way to put it, except on September the 13th.
Hold that thought. We'll be right back, and go right ahead, Lindsey. Lindsey's basically telling us certainly what is happening as far as our finances are concerned as we see the progressive destruction of the American dollar. Now, before Lindsey gets into the rest of the story, I want Lindsey to tell our listeners how they can get in touch, or want Lindsey to tell our listeners how our listeners can get in touch with him and his ministry and get his information. How can people reach you, get hold of your information, Lindsey, and then we'll get on with further discussion of the progressive destruction of the value of our currency. How can people get your material?
We just produced recently a documentary on DVD. It's 3.5 hours long. We've never done anything like it. It is a mini college education on what's happening, the derivative market. Oh, please do a crash course on derivatives immediately, and we'll help you with about 30 minutes on derivatives. And some very prominent financial people in the financial world went together with me to produce it. It's a 3.5 hour DVD documentary entitled Secrets of the Elite. Please, you have those pencils and paper handy, jot down our toll-free number or where you can go on the website. Our toll-free number is 1-888-866-8010. 888-799-6111, or you can go on the web to www.prophecyclub.com, PROPHECYCLUB.com, or toll free 888-799-6111. And I just produced a CD which goes along with the 3.5-hour DVD presentation. It's an hour and 12 minutes long. You play it in your vehicle as you travel down the road if you wish, and I urge you to listen to the CD first before you view Secrets of the Elite. And then, Dr. Stan, there's one thing that is so exciting to me. You know, back about 3.5 years ago, and you knew about it, and you knew what was happening because I mentioned it to you and talked about it on the air. One of the elite contacted me, and they were angry. Oh, they were upset, and they said, Chaplain, you've said too much, you've gone too far. You can't do this any longer. Like the way you're doing it, they said, you're going to have to close down your website. You're getting too much attention. And for about 3.5 to 4 years, I have not had a website because I was ordered to close it down. And I did. And I didn't want to put up one again either. There was a man in Great Britain, in the United Kingdom, who, on his own, without any knowledge of me whatsoever, just set up a website in my name. Well, we found out who he was, contacted him, and he said, please, 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 tell me when you're on the air ahead of time. Dr. Stan, he lists your program tonight in advance before we ever came on the air. And people are literally flocking to the website. I hope you'll take time to go to lindseywilliams.net. Now, if an elite is listening tonight, this is not my website. This man set it up. I give them everything that my elite will allow me to give them, daily bulletins and other things. You'll find all the listings of shows I'm on. Again, lindseywilliams.net, N-E-T, and I think you'll find some very interesting things. And Dr. Stan, I'm excited about it because he's a computer programmer by trade, and he has set up a masterful, beautiful website for me. Okay, let's go back to what the Federal Reserve did and why the nations of the world are running from the American dollar like wild. I called up my elite friend, and I said, please, what in the world is going on? I said, they couldn't announce QE3. And notice that Mr. Bernanke didn't call it QE3. He didn't dare. Now, I know that most of the newsletters have called it that, and that's basically what it is. But he said $40 billion going to buy in mortgage-backed securities every month. And so I asked my elite friend, I said, where is he going to get $40 billion from? And the answer was very plain, thin air. Folks, did you hear me? Our economy is in shambles. The housing market, the bubble has burst. The whole country, unemployment is running wild. Where will the Federal Reserve get $40 billion? And he said, out of thin air. And I said, they are purchasing mortgage-backed securities. Now, let me try to explain. A mortgage-backed security is your house. You heard me correctly. You went one day to some lending institution, whether it be J.P. Morgan Chase, Citibank, Bank of America, Goldman Sachs, or, wherever it might have been, Wells Fargo, Fannie or Freddie, and you said, I'd like to borrow money to buy a house. And they said, okay, we'll be glad to loan you the money if you will give us the house as collateral to cover the loan until you've made the last payment. So, you don't own that house. You say you do, and you live in it, but you really don't. The lending institution owned it. They held the paper. Do you realize that the Federal Reserve is buying every month $40 billion worth of shopping centers, house mortgages, small businesses that are guaranteed by some piece of property somewhere? Then I asked my elite friend, I said, okay, what are they going to do with those mortgages? Are they going to take them? They pulled it out of thin air now. You worked hard to make that house payment. But the Federal Reserve pulls out of thin air $40 billion, bought your house mortgage from that lending institution. I said, what are they going to do with those $40 billion worth of mortgages every month, indefinitely? And he said, Chaplain, they are going to take those house mortgages and invest them in the derivative market. Oh, my goodness, I was appalled. I hope you're getting this. Those of you who know what the derivative market is, your house mortgage was sold like a one-armed bandit Las Vegas-style bet, which the super wealthy and the wealthy nations of the world use as a gambling casino which is better known as the derivative market, and your house mortgage is going to be invested in the derivative market by a fractionally reserved method whereby the Federal Reserve can turn $40 billion in house mortgages packaged together into $360 billion every month. And over a 3-month period, the Federal Reserve will have made $1 trillion off of every month's purchase of $40 billion in mortgage-backed securities. I was appalled. I was beside myself, and then I asked him the other question. I said, okay, now, the Federal Reserve has invested these in the derivative market, which is about as shaky as a one-armed bandit in Las Vegas. It could collapse tomorrow. And what would happen to your house? Owned by somebody in China or Russia or Europe? I said, now, let's go to the next step. These institutions, Fannie, Freddie, J.P. Morgan, Citibank, Bank of America, Goldman Sachs, Wells Fargo, that held these mortgages, they are going to be given $40 billion. Folks, $40 billion. Should that not pull the economy out of the doldrums? Shouldn't this help the recession? Wouldn't this bring the real estate market back to a booming again if those institutions took $40 billion and put it back into the economy? Sure it would. But what are they going to do with it? You ready? I hope you're holding on to your chair and you're very firmly seated. I hope this angers you to no end. I asked my friend, I said, what are those institutions going to do with $40 billion every month that they have now? They don't have toxic mortgages anymore. They've got $40 billion every month. He said, Chaplain, behind closed doors, there was a secretive, I'll use the word secretive. He just said behind closed doors. There was an agreement made between these lending institutions and the Federal Reserve before Mr. Bernanke ever announced what he was going to do, that they would take that $40 billion that's given to them every month and invest it in treasuries. I was floored. I was speechless. I could not say anything for a few moments. I said, they aren't going to put it in to help us out of the recession? No. Not going to help out the economy? No. Small businesses? No, not going to give small business loans. Not going to help the real estate market? No. Invested in treasuries? Okay, what are treasuries? You've heard of T-bills. Every so many days, the Federal Reserve issues T-bills and Federal Reserve notes of different kinds, and the nations of the world, the super wealthy of the world, have flocked to buy them because they were always considered the most stable currency on the face of the earth that they could possibly put their wealth and treasuries in, and they have flocked to buy T-bills. And now, the nations of the world, since they're afraid of the American dollar, have not been coming to these auctions every so many days. And as a result, last year, in the past 12 months, the Federal Reserve has had to buy 60% of its own treasury issues because the super wealthy of the world and the nations of the world did not show up to buy them. Mr. Bernanke was getting desperate. The purchase of T-bills pays the interest on the national debt of $16 trillion, which is backed up by T-bills, which have been bought over many, many years by the super wealthy of the world. Now, there was nobody to pay the interest on this national debt, and the Federal Reserve was getting desperate. I mean, literally desperate. This did not happen in QE1, did not happen in QE2. This time, they were so desperate, they said, okay, we will buy these mortgage-backed securities from you. You turn around and buy treasuries, which will enable us to pay the interest on the national debt, and they say we'll do it every month indefinitely because the Federal Reserve is in such horrible condition. Dr. Stan, when I heard this, I hope the American people realize, and I need to make a statement here now, please. I hope you'll write this down. The way that it's going on right now, $40 billion every month, the Fed, the elite of the world, will own every piece of mortgaged real estate in the United States of America before this process of $40 billion every month is finished. Did you catch this? The Federal Reserve The elite of the world. Federal Reserve is not an agency of the federal government any more than Federal Express is. And when this is finished, they will own every mortgaged shopping center, every mortgaged house, every mortgaged small business. They will own it. They will hold the mortgage papers. Now, the only thing the elite need to do at this point in order to bring in that new world order is to so destroy the purchasing power of the American dollar that you cannot afford to make your house payment. And when you can't make it, intentionally they're doing this. Every month they are destroying the purchasing power of the American dollar by printing out of thin air or pulling out of thin air $40 billion. The nations of the world know this, and they're rushing out of the American dollar. And eventually, you won't be able to afford to buy groceries and put clothes on the back and gasoline in the gas tank and make that house mortgage at the same time, because gasoline now is going up to $5 a gallon. The price of those groceries has nearly doubled. And then you'll say, well, there's one thing I don't have to do. I don't have to make that mortgage payment. Then that Federal Reserve, who now owns that mortgage of yours, steps in and says, oh, we'll have to repossess. What did they get it for? They pulled it out of thin air. And now that house you've worked so hard for, which you had a mortgage on, is owned by the Federal Reserve, and they say, we'll be glad, more than happy. Just turn around and rent that house back to you. You just stay in it. And then you and your children and your grandchildren can join the New World Order. You don't need your American dollar anymore. We have a new currency for you. You say, but Chaplain, this couldn't possibly happen. Okay, I want to prove to you that it has already happened, and you might have picked up on it, but just in case, let me try to explain what happened. Instantaneously, when Mr. Bernanke made that announcement as to what the Federal Reserve was going to do on September the 13th, I want to give you some actual figures, and you go back and look them up, see if they're true. Instantaneously, upon his announcement, gold went up $49, just like that. That's 3%. Silver instantaneously went up $3. That's 9%. Gasoline went up at the gas pump right that second. They went out and changed the sign. Went up 15 cents. That's 4%. But wait a minute. Gasoline did not go up. Oh, you say, Chaplain, you just said it did. No, it didn't. No, the gasoline is 4 quarts to the gallon. That did not change. It's still 4 quarts to the gallon. What changed? The currency that you purchased that gallon of gasoline with, because the Federal Reserve pulled $40 billion out of thin air and threw it into the economy. It weakened the purchasing power of the American dollar by 15 cents at the gas pump. And this is going to happen every month from now on. Mark my words, you will see the prices inflating because the Federal Reserve is destroying the value of the dollar. And the New World Order, this is exactly what they want, because now they can step in and say, well, you can't make your house mortgage. We'll be glad to take it back. We'll give you a new currency, in fact. Just give up your Constitution. We have all the answers for you. And it's better known as the New World Order. It's all a part of the plan. They're not destroying America at all. Someone asked me on a radio show the other day, they said, Chaplain Williams, why would the elite of the world destroy their own country? They said, you knew them those 3 years. I said, yes. I still keep in touch with some of them today. And they said, the elite are destroying their own country. I said, no, they're not. I said, you have to understand the mindset of the elite to understand this. I said, the elite are not destroying their own country at all. They are taking over the country so that they can bring in the New World Order. They're not destroying America. Someone asked me also on the show the other day, it was a call-in to our program, and they said, well, Chaplain, where do most of the elite live? Well, I didn't know them all. I just knew a few of them. And everyone that I knew, the United States of America was their residence. There may be a few that live outside of America. And I said, they live in America? And they said, well, they're destroying their own country. I said, no, they're not. I said, this is an intentional plan in order to so destroy the dollar that when your children are crying because you can't afford to go and buy food and put clothes on their back and gasoline in the gas tank and pay the mortgage at the same time, you will say, oh, please, just give me a currency. And the New World Order will step in and say, we have a currency. Your old dollar wasn't backed by gold and silver, but we've got a new currency that's backed by gold and silver. And if you just accept our new currency and give up your Constitution and your rights, we'll be more than happy to just bring in a new world order where everything will be fine. And then I said, what is the real end goal of the New World Order announced by Daddy Bush, George Herbert Bush, over 20 years ago? The real purpose of all of this, bring in the New World Order so that they can turn around under their auspices and bring the world back to a condition where it is under their control.
And of course, along with this comes the destruction of Christianity, because the motivation behind these people is not only a new world order, but a new world religion. That's why they've taken God and prayer, the Ten Commandments, morality out of our schools, out of our society, why Christians are ridiculed at every turn. They know exactly what they're doing, because behind this whole effort to bring about a one-world government is it also a desire to bring about a one-world religion. Oh, you can still call yourself a Christian. They've just changed the music, the message, the very essence of what Christianity is really all about. And we'll be back in just a moment to wrap up tonight's program with Lindsey Williams. Well, Lindsey, you've got 3 minutes to wrap up the program for us.
Dr. Stan, this all reminds me so much of what is in the archives of your programs that I said back well over 2 years ago. My elite friend told me, he said, Chaplain, there's not going to be any shortage of food and water on the grocery store shelves. And at the time, I couldn't quite understand what he was saying, because nearly everybody in the conservative field was saying, oh, there's going to be shortages on the grocery store shelves. And so I asked him the question. I said, what do you mean that there are not going to be any shortages of food and water? Now, that was 2 years ago. Dr. Dan, you probably remember me saying it. And you see it. You go to the grocery store today, there positively is no shortage of food and water on the grocery store shelves. They're still full, and everybody thought they'd be empty by now. And he said to me, he said, Chaplain, the food will be there. But he said, you'll go hungry. And I said, what do you mean? He said, Chaplain, it's the currency. Do you understand? It's the currency that you purchase that food with. He said, the food and water will still be there. But he said, the currency is going to diminish in its purchasing power to the point that you may go hungry because you cannot afford to buy the food that's on the grocery store shelves, even they're full. Dr. Stan, I can see that so readily now. When I see all of these nations saying, we don't want the reserve currency of the world anymore, we don't want the petrodollar any longer. Now, $40 billion out of thin air with the Federal Reserve. Folks, there were many people who made great fortunes during 1929 through 1933. Not everybody stood in a soup line. If you know the facts, you know the issues, you can spare yourself heartache. There's no reason to lose sleep at night. You don't need to look behind bushes and look for black helicopters. If you'll take action now, you still have time while the American dollar is fairly firm. And I loved what you said a moment ago, Dr. Stan, just before the break. You said they are trying to destroy the spiritual atmosphere of America. May I say to you, everything you've heard tonight, please set your spiritual house in order first. You must know that Christ is your Savior. Go to the book of Romans and read it, I beg of you, and know what the Bible says about setting that spiritual house in order, knowing Christ is your Savior. When your house is on a solid rock, instead of on the sinking sand of this world, you will be able to survive this. You will be able to stand it. And I believe that somehow we'll be able to turn this thing around. I am not going to sit back and take this sitting down.
Lindsey, I'm going to have to interrupt you. We're at the end of the program here. And, of course, our guest has been Lindsey Williams, and I do hope you have enjoyed him. And, of course, Lindsey agrees with me, or I agree with Lindsey, that this is truly a spiritual battle being fought on a financial battlefield. Lindsey, thank you so very much for being with us, and we'll look forward to talking to you again real soon.
Thank you, Dr. Stan. God bless.
And you too. Bye-bye. Well, I hope our listeners have enjoyed the program. We're in real financial problems. Basically, we have a couple of talks. I gave them 4 or 5 years ago. One is Financial Tsunami. The other is Financial Armageddon. There are actually syllabus that goes with those talks. You may be able to find them on my website. If you can't, why, certainly you can order them from Radio Liberty by calling 1-800-544-8927. That is the DVD on the Financial Armageddon, the DVD on the Financial Tsunami, and then, of course, the syllabus goes with that. You'll certainly want to get my book, Brotherhood of Darkness. You want to get Ed Griffin's excellent book, The Creature from Jekyll Island. Gives you the background of the financial problems, the financial struggle that's taking place today. So if you'd like to get these items, you know how to reach us, 1-800-544-8927. Then, of course, I hope that you'll want to get my talk on The Dark Secret. It's a DVD. On The Forbidden Secret, it's a DVD, and there's syllabuses that go at least with The Dark Secret, and I believe the other one as well. But the information is there. You need to get it. You need to help us get it out. Because behind everything going on today are truly demonic forces. Certainly, if you enjoy DVDs, our friend Chris Pitto put out a trilogy, 3 of them. They were called The Secret Mystery of America's Beginning. Going into the occult forces that were here when America was first created. Now remember, the Christians were here. This was predominantly a Christian nation. But the occultists were here as well. And they wanted to use America because they'd been planning on this for thousands of years. They knew America was here. They wanted to use this hemisphere to bring about this world government. The idea is that America would always lead the way, and they would use the financial and military power of the United States to dominate the world, which is why today, why we have troops in 130 nations, 800 to 900 foreign military bases. And if you really think that we're fighting terrorism, you need, of course, to get the book on the Devil's Game, going into how American and British intelligence created the Muslim Brotherhood, which is the major organizer behind this whole world terrorist movement, and how, of course, the Muslim Brotherhood then was financed following the Second World War by the CIA and is still financed today. Now, the author, of course, thinks this is an accident. It is not an accident. It's part of a long-range plan to utilize the threat of terrorism to justify ever more power for the federal government until we are one day simply a military police state established in the name of protecting us against those wicked terrorists, just as exactly as they created communism and we had to defend ourselves against the wicked communists, and then they created and financed the Nazis, and then we had, of course, to give more power to the government to fight the wicked Nazis. And now, of course, we have the wicked terrorists of the Muslim Brotherhood. We're going to have to, of course, mobilize to fight them. Understand, ladies and gentlemen, that all of this is very real. It's not imaginary. Our job, of course, is to get the American people to understand what's going on. Certainly, you can get copies of our programs. You can get copies of the books we carry at RadioLiberty.com. RadioLiberty.com. And, of course, if you're in a position to help Radio Liberty, to join the Radio Liberty family of supporters, we'd certainly be appreciative, because we want to maintain certainly this network of stations that carry us across America as long as we possibly can, as long as God gives me breath. So please pray for America. Pray for our ministers, our leaders, for Alex and for Joyce and for Noah Hutchings and John Leffler. But please remember to pray for Radio Liberty, my ministry, for our provision and our protection. And so until tomorrow evening, we'll be back again. Dr. Stan saying good night, and may the Lord be with you.